Hi, my name's Anna Gillians. I'm one of the PBS consultants with BILD, and I've been asked to just do a short little talk on managing anxiety. So we know that this time right now with COVID is a really anxiety-provoking time for a lot of people. Whether you have some kind of special complex needs or whether you're caring for somebody who is, then there's a lot going on. So any of this that I'm going to say now in a very short broadcast in 5 minutes is applicable to any anxiety anytime, but just some hints and tips that might be useful to think about at the moment. So I guess first of all, just to mention that anxiety can be absolutely crippling. It can freeze us. It taps into the oldest part of the brain, which is our survival mechanism. Really, it's there to protect us from threat. So what can happen is that once those mechanisms are triggered, we either want to run away, fight to survive, or we can shut down and freeze. So any of those three can make life really, really difficult for us. They override any of the logical processes. And I guess that's important for us to know, because trying to rationalise with somebody when they're in that acute state of anxiety is not always particularly useful. So I guess there's a whole load of stuff that we can do to try to make sure we don't get there, prevention always being better than cure. So we'll start there. The first step I would point out is that if we try to just push people through something that makes them anxious and it gets to the point where they're really frightened, then we're almost concreting in that person's brain that yes, this is a scary thing, and the anxiety can build and be worse every time. So if we're trying to do something, let's say going out, because going out is really anxiety provoking for a lot of people at the moment. If we go for a big long hour walk through an area where there's a lot of people and it's really scary, then we've made it a really difficult experience, and the next time we want to go out, that aspect of the brain will kick in again and say no, this is scary. So it's always good to start really small and start with bits that the person can achieve before their anxiety peaks. We stop before the anxiety peaks, so that we're gradually building up that feeling of, oh, this is safe, this is okay, I've managed it fine. And think about what's going to make it okay for that person. What makes it worth it for them to make that effort, and what makes it feel safe. So it might be, today all I'm going to do is open the front door and look outside for 1 minute, for 10 seconds, whatever's achievable. So keeping it achievable, keeping it small, and gradually building up the capacity, I guess, to deal with those situations rather than ploughing on through the really scary thing. So the second point there really is around, in terms of what's going to make it worth it, thinking about what is reinforcing for that person. What do they enjoy? What do they like? What's going to help them to think, yeah, worth it. So I'm going out, but I get to see somebody I really like, or I'm going out, but I get to, buy something that I really wanted. So having a bit of a goal attached to it is useful. And then lastly, beyond those sort of tiny steps, we've got anxiety management techniques as well. And some of this is around us thinking about what we can do when that person's in an acute state of anxiety. But the other thing is, if we can help to develop tools for ourselves and for this other person that can then be used proactively, then they can become a strategy, another tool in that person's toolbox. So that is going to be very person dependent in terms of what that person finds calming and relaxing. There's loads of different techniques out there. I'm just going to mention one briefly today for an example, which is an exercise called the Soles of the Feet exercise. And the idea is that you gather up all your attention and focus it all right down into the soles of your feet. So you would talk through, okay, can you feel your toes? Can you feel where they're touching your sock or your shoe or the ground? Does it feel hot? Does it feel cold? Does it feel soft? Does it feel tingling? And then work through the soles of the feet, the balls of the foot, the arch of the foot, really nice and slowly, taking time. And the idea is that you would start teaching the person this technique when they're calm and okay, and you do it together. and practice it, because obviously practicing embeds it into the brain as something known, something familiar. And then at the time when something is starting to become a little bit stressful, you can support the person to use that technique, with the idea that in the long term, that technique just becomes something that they can tap into. I have to put my hands up and say something I use myself. If I'm in a situation where I know it's a little bit scary, then it's really useful to just drop the attention in that way and use that technique just to just remind the brain. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, reminds the brain that it's okay, it's not a massive threat. So a couple of hints and tips for today: taking really small steps, not pushing through into the really scary moments, making it worthwhile, and thinking about what anxiety management techniques you can use. All the best.